everyone to the second episode of making my 1830s corded corset. In the last video I already pieced together the front and the back. Today I'll be starting with making the bust gussets. First of all, baste the fashion fabric and the lining together. Use the same method I talked about last time to draw all the cording channels and machine stitch them. Take apart the basting and iron away the pen marks. For cording, I used this 4-gauge cotton yarn and a large eye needle. This is quite large compared to a regular needle, which makes cording a lot less painful. Also make sure that the tip is blunt because you don't want to accidentally damage the fabric. Because the gusset is quite small, I'm just cording it back and forth like this instead of cutting it off for each row. The logic is really the same as stitching the cording channels. Open up the corset where the bust is inserted. The seam allowance needs to be folded towards the inside, but the cording channels got in the way, so I had to take apart some of these stitches. After folding the seam allowance of both layers, I inserted the gusset in between and basted them all together. And I realized that I made the gussets way too big. Guys, this is what happens when you don't have the patience to make a good mock-up, so please don't be like me. Anyway, I altered the gussets and trimmed off the extra cords. Again, basted by hand and machine finish. I was quite confused at first why there's this stitching line right next to the gusset opening on the pattern. But now I understand that this area is so thick that it appears very bulky. Stitching around 1 cm away from the opening would make it look a lot flatter. I also took this chance to restitch the few lines that I took apart. Once the gussets are inserted, I can move on to cording the rest of the corset. The few cords next to the bust extend all the way from the top to the bottom, so I corded these the same way as I did on the gussets. It can be difficult to push the needle forward, so you might want to use a pair of pliers to make your life easier. I left a little bit extra cord on both ends, just in case. Most of the cording channels are closed on one end and open on the other. For these, I would stick the cord in from the open end and poke the needle out from the side of the lining and pull it out with pliers. Again, I left around 1 centimeter of extra cord. For the cording around the waist, which is closed on both ends, I also had to push the needle in from the back. It can be quite frustrating at first because it's really easy to just poke through both layers. But once you find the right angle, it's not that hard to bring the needle in between 2 layers. This corset has a total of 204 cords, which sounds like a lot, but I actually got it done in just 1 day, although my hand did hurt for a couple days after. There is 1 bone on each side of the center back eyelets. This is used not only to give a better posture, but also to help protect the eyelet holes from tearing. After inserting the 4 boning in, it's time to deal with these extra cords. The fabrics more or less shrank a bit after all the cords were inserted, so I gently pulled the fabric back to its original shape before trimming off the loose ends. Pull the fabric again and the remaining cords will go back inside quite easily. All that's left now are some small details. Fold the seam allowance of the shoulders, put in the shoulder straps and hold them in place temporarily with a couple pins. Many 1830s dresses have off-the-shoulder design, so the shoulder straps of the corset need to sit right at the shoulder bone. Mine were a bit too high up, so I made some adjustments before stitching them in. Then I cut out an opening at the top of the bust lining for the bust to be inserted. I used the buttonhole stitch to finish off the raw edges. Just like the 1870s corset, I left half an inch of seam allowance all around the corset only to prevent it from fraying, not because I actually need it. I trimmed away these extra fabric and used a 1-inch bias binding made from the same fabric to bind the top and bottom of the corset. I machine stitched it from the front and slip stitched it at the back. If you look at extant garments from the period, you will see that many of the corsets have a drawstring design that allows some adjustment at the bust. So I made 2 eyelets on both sides of the bust and inserted the drawstring in before closing the bias binding. Then I made the eyelets on the shoulder straps so that the straps can be tied to the corset. The last part, which is also the part I was most looking forward to, is making the corset lacing. I've been wanting to try the fan lacing on this corset from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art for quite a long time. It looks pretty complicated, but essentially it's just many individual rows of lacing grouped together into a small tab in the front. I used a very sturdy cotton cord for the lacing. The length of each row is determined by crossing it on the back and bringing it to the center front. Once all 13 rows are cut to the right lengths, I crossed them over one by one and tied them up on the side with a hairband. I did another fitting and adjusted the hairband to the right place. Then I marked the position of the hairband on every single cord and trimmed the extras off around 1 or 2 centimeters away from the mark. Cut out 2 squares, fold them by half, and sandwich the center front tie in between. Originally, I used the same tape as the bust drawstring, but then I realized that it's not strong enough to hold the tension, so I replaced it with the cording. Stick all the cords into the tab and stitch it closed with a small stitch length. I cannot get over how satisfying it is to lace up this corset, and I highly recommend that you try this out yourself. As always, thank you guys for sticking with me on my reconstruction projects, and I shall see you next time with my finished 1830s gown.